Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Oxhorn, and this video contains some major plot spoilers dealing with which characters in the game are synths and the fates of some companions in the game, not to mention some endgame spoilers as well. So if you don't want any spoilers, turn back now. You have been warned. Alright, let's talk a little bit about what the Institute actually uses their Gen 3 synths for. We know, of course, that they use Gen 3 synths in the Institute as janitors, as workers and laborers. They use some Gen 3 synths as coursers, but we find a lot of Gen 3 synths out in the Commonwealth as well. What are they sent to the Commonwealth to do? Well, there are two stories about specific synths that we know of. The first, of course, is Roger Warwick. We learn from the Institute line of quests that the Institute sent a synth to replace the original father at the Warwick homestead so that they could use the fertile land there to conduct some farming experiments.
Listen, I need your help. The whole operation's in danger of being exposed. I think my foreman, Bill Sutton, suspects what I really am.
This all takes place in the Institute quest, Building a Better Crop. We learn from terminal entries in the Institute that the original Roger Warwick was taken back to the Institute, interrogated before finally being killed. One thing to point out is that the synth of Roger Warwick knows that he's a synth. The next is the story of Mayor McDonough. You are sent to Diamond City as a representative of the Institute to talk with Mayor McDonough, whom we find out is a synth.
I trust you've been sent by our mutual friend, Mr. Io. I hope he's doing well. Hancock. Ugh. He won't shut up about me. Every caravan that comes from Good Neighbor is loaded with hearsay and rumors about my loyalties. I keep telling our mutual friends that they need to step up our plan to deal with him. Reiterate the urgency, if you could. The full details are in my report, along with some other points of interest. Here it is. Make sure that nobody sees this. Better you destroy it than let it fall into the wrong hands.
We learned that the Institute sent Mayor McDonough there to spy on the population of Diamond City, to expose any threats, and to try and tamp down any anti-Institute sentiment that could be building there. Another thing to notice about Mayor McDonough is that he also knows that he's a synth. And then there's the art versus art random encounter. While you're wandering the wasteland, you'll come across two men, one that has a gun leveled at the head of the other. Both of them are named Art, and they claim that the other is a synth.
Someone, please, help! This thing is gonna kill me! Please, you gotta help me. This guy's a synth, and he's gonna kill me and replace me and my family. Oh, God. My kids. Don't you dare bring them up. He's the synth, and he wants to replace me. Please. Please, you gotta believe me. You can't let that thing do this.
By passing some speech checks, we discover that the synth of Art knows that he's a synth.
You're with the Institute? All right, look, this guy knows I'm a synth. So just help me take care of him, all right? Otherwise, I'm gonna be in a lot of trouble.
Let's all just calm down. No one has to die.
No, he wants me dead. He's never gonna stop. I have to kill him. Don't listen to it. It'll say anything to convince you.
All I need is for you to put down the gun. Then we can talk this through.
All right. I'm putting the gun away. Oh, thank God. Now, how about you and I clean up this mess? Let's do this. You're dead.
Terrific! It's a fight then! Oh! And that's that then!
Christ. I need to get out of here. They're monsters. Christ, that thing was wearing my face. Why the hell would the Institute want to replace me?
What can we learn from this? Well, let's put together what we do know. Number one, we know that the Institute must have told Art that he was a synth, that Art spent at least some time in the Institute. Otherwise, how would he have learned that he was a synth? There's no way for him to know that he's a synth unless he was told that he's a synth by the Institute. And number two, he looks exactly like the real Art whom he's trying to replace. That can't have been an accident, and it couldn't have been done by the synth Art. This means that the Institute purposefully handcrafted the synth version of Art to look like the real Art. This proves that the Institute really is replacing people in the Commonwealth with synth versions of themselves. It means that the people's fear of the Institute is justified, that their paranoia about being replaced by a synth is also justified. So why is the Institute doing this? Well, with Roger Warwick, it was to conduct an experiment on raising better crops. With Mayor McDonough, it was to help with their reconnaissance. We also know that the Institute puts out a bunch of synth crows that they use as flying cameras to spy on the Commonwealth for their own safety. So I don't think that it's a stretch to think that the original human art either belonged to a community where the Institute wanted to conduct an experiment or had some kind of interaction with a population that the Institute considered to be a security risk. They do a whole lot of spying on the Commonwealth. Not only do they put their synths out there to spy for them, but they also use many of the roaming caravanners as spies. Cricket, for example, is a spy of the Institute. We learned that from Institute terminals. Now the flip side to that is that not all synths are emissaries or tools of the Institute. A major plot of the Institute line of quests is about the reclamation of rogue synths. Gabriel at Libertalia, and then after you beat the game, you're given a series of Radiant quests where you're constantly going out into the Commonwealth to retrieve synths. The reason there are so many rogue synths is because the Railroad is freeing synths from the Institute and then wiping their minds. The Railroad wipes their minds so that the synths don't even know that they are synths, which makes it much harder for the Institute to track them down. This, incidentally, is the majority of the synths that you meet in the Commonwealth. For example, Magnolia is a synth. Now we have to believe one of two things. Either she's a plant from the Institute, or she doesn't know she's a synth. We only find out she's a synth by killing her. Similarly, Sturgis is a synth. Either he's a plant from the Institute, or he doesn't know that he is a synth, because he was rescued by the Railroad and his mind was wiped. We have no evidence to think that either Magnolia or Sturgis is a tool of the Institute, so we must conclude that the most likely explanation is that they are rescued synths that had their minds wiped, and then they cobbled together a personality as they lived their lives. Now there is one unique synth that doesn't fit either of those categories, and we talked a little bit about him in yesterday's video, Paladin Danse. Danse is a synth, but he is not a tool of the Institute. He's a member of the Brotherhood of Steel, and a proud member at that. And yet at the same time, his memory was not wiped. He has a memory. He remembers his childhood. He remembers a childhood in Rivet City, in the Capital Wastelands. He's got an entire lifetime's worth of memories.
I feel like I've been in control of my entire life, making my own decisions and determining my own fate. Even though the proof states I'm a synth, I don't feel any different than I did before. I still feel like a human.
That's one thing that the Railroad does not do. The Railroad does not manufacture memories. The Railroad will wipe minds, but the Railroad does not manufacture new memories. The only other instance of this happening in the game is in Far Harbor. We learned that Captain Avery, the original Captain Avery, was killed by Dima. Dima then wiped the mind of a volunteer synth and then placed the original Captain Avery's memories into that synth. Then there's Dr. Amari in the memory den. Glory brings us the body of a synth who is brain dead, and so Dr. Amari overwrites that synth's memory with the mind of Curie from the Mrs. Nanny robot. However, we learn that she has never done that before. This is a one-time thing. It appears to be a complicated thing to do. Dima tried once again to restore the memories of a synth. Victoria, one of the synths at Acadia, was badly damaged, and the only way Dima could save her life was by erasing her mind and trying to rebuild it. But he didn't do a very good job, which is why she has a dysfunctional personality. Now, many commenters have said that there's a terminal entry in the SRB that talks about Paladin Danse having escaped, but that's actually incorrect. The SRB terminal does indeed talk about an escaped synth who was last seen around the Boston airport. However, this synth's unit designation is S943, but we learned from the Blind Betrayal questline that Paladin Danse's designation is M797. So the two can't be the same synth. There is therefore no mention of Paladin Danse anywhere in the Institute. So that leaves us with this strange synth called Danse. He couldn't be an Institute plant, and yet he also couldn't be a rescued synth because he has a very long memory. This makes Paladin Danse incredibly unique. He's the only known synth for whom the Institute handcrafted a specific memory, but then also removed his memory of being manufactured. They made him think he wasn't a synth. Now, I can only see them doing this for a couple of reasons. Number one, espionage. The best way to infiltrate the Brotherhood of Steel with a synth is using a synth who doesn't know that he's a synth. The problem with this is, yes, you can get a synth into the ranks of the Brotherhood of Steel this way, but then you can't get any information out of it. If the synth doesn't know that he's a synth, then he's gonna fully embrace the ideals of the Brotherhood of Steel and become your worst enemy. Paladin Danse is a great enemy of the Institute. Everything he does is in defiance of the Institute. He tries to destroy the Institute. It would be very stupid of the Institute to basically build the perfect soldier for the Brotherhood of Steel. Now, we do know that the new lives that these synths adopt for themselves become really compelling. If you talk with Roger Warwick, he makes a mistake. He refers to June and Jane as his wife and his daughter.
He's been spying on me and having secret conversations with our farmhand Cedric. Now, he's starting to work on my wife and kids, trying to turn them against me too.
You have to remind him that they're not his real family.
They aren't your wife and kids. Don't lose perspective here.
I know that. It's a habit, I guess. I've gotten used to saying it.
He got so wrapped up in the day-to-day life that he was living there that he almost forgot that they weren't his real family. Maybe the memories that the Institute programs into a synth become so compelling that synths are wont to forget the fact that they're even synths. Maybe those memories are so compelling, and in combination with the new reality that they're living, they slowly push out any thought of the Institute and instead embrace this new life that they have for themselves. Here's what I think happened with Paladin Danse. I think the Institute made Paladin Danse to infiltrate the Brotherhood of Steel before the Brotherhood came to the Commonwealth. To this end, they manufactured memories of an entire childhood and put them in the brain of Synth Danse. They then dropped him in the capital wastelands with orders to join the ranks of the Brotherhood and infiltrate it. But while in the capital wastelands, Danse met a man named Cutler. They scraped together a living as traders, and the day-to-day reality pushed out any memory of the Institute. Both he and Cutler joined the Brotherhood of Steel. They train under Paladin Krieg, and then Danse is personally there during the assault on Adams Air Force Base. His new reality as a knight within the Brotherhood of Steel, combined with all of the tragedies that he had to face, having to execute his best friend Cutler after Cutler was exposed to the FEV, after watching his drill sergeant die during the attack on Adams Air Force Base, and then after losing almost his entire recon team after he's sent to the Commonwealth to search for the Institute. The reason I think that many of those experiences for Danse were real is because they involved so many other people. He fought alongside a lot of Brotherhood of Steel soldiers during the assault on the Adams Air Force Base. He knew Arthur Maxson personally when Maxson was a child, and he watched Maxson grow up. He spent decades as a loyal Brotherhood of Steel soldier, all the while not knowing that he was a synth. Yes, it's possible that the real Paladin Danse was killed during his recon trip to the Commonwealth and then replaced by a synth, but this brings us back to the original problem I had, which is that it's no benefit to the Institute to create a synth that joins the Brotherhood of Steel that doesn't know that it's a synth. They don't gain anything by doing that. They just make a super soldier for the Brotherhood. A synth has to know that he's a synth in order to give any valuable information back to the Institute. That is, of course, unless there's some way for the Institute to gather information without the synth knowing that he's a synth. But we have no evidence in the game for that. The only thing we find in the game is the existence of the recall code. Yes, there is a specific code that you can say to a synth that shuts the synth down, but that's all it does. It shuts the synth down. It doesn't make the synth explode. It doesn't turn the synth aggressive. It doesn't restore a synth's memory of being a synth. It only shuts the synth down, and we have no evidence in the game that there are any other codes that anyone could say to achieve any of those other results. Additionally, we have no evidence that the Institute can manipulate synths from afar. In order to trigger the recall code, you have to be with the synth in person. We learned this from the synth retention quest, where you have to go to Libertalia to retrieve Gabriel. You have to stand in front of his face and say the recall code in order to shut him down. You can't do that from the Institute, otherwise there would have been no no need to go to Libertalia to begin with. If they had the capacity to issue the code from afar, then they could just reclaim all of their missing synths from all over the Commonwealth. The railroad would no longer be a threat. The SRB would no longer need to exist. For these reasons, I don't think that it's possible for the Institute to remotely trigger a synth or to get any information from that synth without the synth knowing that he or she is a synth. So here's a quick recap of everything we've learned and everything we've been able to deduce. We learned in my video on the FEV that the Institute's original plan was to use the FEV as the basis for their new generation of super synth. After decades of experimenting, that attempt failed, which is why they went into Vault 111 to get a pure, unspoilt sample of human DNA, the sole survivor's child's, which is what they used as the basis for all Gen 3 synths. Gen 3 synths were originally going to be made with FEV, but since that attempt failed, they were instead made with the DNA of your son. The second thing we learned is that synths are indistinguishable from human beings. We learned this from the Covenant line of quests. There is no test, from psychological to DNA, that can accurately uncover whether or not a synth is a synth. This makes them, for all intents and purposes, absolutely identical to human beings, with the exception that they can't age. We learned that from an overheard conversation in the Institute, and they can't get fat, also overheard from a conversation in the Institute. I believe Mayor McDonough is fat simply because he was created to be fat, but apparently they can eat as many sweets as they want without actually gaining fat. We learned from my video on Synth Myths Busted that they do take radiation damage just like all other humans, and they do not have any sort of additional energy resistance that can be detected using the awareness perk. They do sleep at night just like all other humans, and they do eat when they get hungry, though it's still debatable whether or not they actually need the food to survive. And then the Institute uses synths for their own purposes within the Institute, for experimentation outside the Institute, and for reconnaissance and espionage. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything we know about how the Institute uses their synths. Do you have another theory? Is there something that I missed? Let me know in the comment section below. I read all of your comments and I use your comments as inspiration for future videos. If you like what I do here and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. Patreon subscribers gain access to my private Discord server, as well as a bunch of other cool Oxhorn perks. But more than anything, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so glad you are here watching. Thank you for watching from the bottom of my heart, and I'll see you tomorrow morning with a brand new video.